Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, October 13th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the states of Pennsylvania and Michigan as we look ahead to the November midterm elections. Now, these two states have extremely important governor races that are going to determine a lot for the states themselves. They both currently have Democratic incumbents, with the state of Michigan having a Democratic incumbent running for re-election, that is Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and the state of Pennsylvania having an incumbent Democratic governor who cannot run for re-election, that is Governor Tom Wolf, in which the Democratic nominee is Attorney General of the state, Josh Shapiro. The states themselves have been extremely competitive in past elections. The reason why these were amongst the most competitive, at least expected to be competitive states, was because of its close and competitive nature in the 2020 election. In 2020, Joe Biden won the state of Michigan by 2.8%. Not exactly an overwhelming margin of victory, enough so that at least at that point in time, no one was expecting Michigan to be as solid for the Democratic Party as it currently stands today. The state of Pennsylvania is also often grouped into the state of Michigan as well as one of the close and competitive swing states in the Rust Belt region, talking Wisconsin, Michigan. Pennsylvania is arguably not so much Rust Belt, but when we talk about the three states, we have Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, because that is what we determine to be the blue wall, the region of the country that had been solid for the Democratic Party for 24 consecutive years until 2016, when Donald Trump broke through. But then it reverted back. In 2020, Joe Biden won all three of the states, but Pennsylvania was exceptionally close as well. Michigan might have been close, but Pennsylvania was even closer. It was a 1.2% margin between President Biden and President Trump, and it ultimately ended up being immediately on the radar for the national GOP as they headed into the November midterm elections. Now, starting off in this race, the state of Pennsylvania absolutely could have been competitive. The state of Michigan absolutely could have been as well. In fact, they were competitive for brief periods of time. And looking at our governor's forecast today, both of these states are likely Democratic states, but looking at the earliest forecast on my map from August of 2021, Michigan was lean blue and Pennsylvania was tilt. As the months went on through the end of 2022, things actually got worse for the Democratic Party. Pennsylvania became tilt red, Michigan became tilt blue, and by November of 2021, Pennsylvania was lean red and Michigan was tilt red. So how do we go from a point where Michigan and Pennsylvania are tilt and lean red respectively, and then head into now where we are at a likely Democratic characterization for both of them? Well, a lot has changed in terms of the electability and reliability of the Republican Party within these states. In 2018, the Republican Party didn't exactly have that much of a great showing when it came down to these two states. The state of Pennsylvania went to the Democrats by 17.1%, and in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer defeated Bill Schuette by 9.6%. Tom Wolf defeated Scott Wagner in this not-so-competitive race. Michigan, at least, was within single digits, though barely. Gretchen Whitmer's victory of 9.6% was in tune with the time of 2018. On the Senate race that was happening at the same time, the Democrats blew out the Republicans in both Pennsylvania and Michigan. But our national environment is nowhere near where it was back in 2018. The generic ballot today stands at a worse point for the Democratic Party relative to where they were. And yet somehow they're performing slightly better in Michigan and practically on par with where they were back in 2018. The governor's forecast across Pennsylvania and Michigan have been very solid for the Democratic Party practically since the very beginning. Michigan more so than Pennsylvania, but we'll talk a bit more about Michigan and what actually happened within the state. But Pennsylvania truly was just the nomination of an extremely bad candidate on the Republican side. Doug Mastriano is an extremist well beyond whatever could be imagined for President Trump. He's the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but on the governor level in a swing state. He's not in some safe district where he can say whatever he wants. He truly is one of the most extreme candidates we have seen this election cycle. And unlike Dr. Oz in the Pennsylvania Senate race, Doug Mastriano didn't exactly have an extremely competitive race. I mean, just looking at the margin of victory for Doug Mastriano, he got a plurality by quite a bit, by double digits over his next opponent. He actually ran against a former nominee for Senate back in 2018. That was Representative Lou Barletta, who had served in Congress from the state of Pennsylvania, vied for the Senate election in 2018, lost by double digits, ran for governor in Pennsylvania, and honestly would be faring a lot better. Now, the Democrats also have an individually strong candidate when it comes down to both Pennsylvania and Michigan. I will say that having the incumbent is typically a beneficial thing in the governor election, but specifically in Pennsylvania, the Democrats did not have an incumbent they could run, so they went with the next best thing. An attorney general, another statewide elected official, Josh Shapiro, who won in 2020, outperformed President Biden by about 3 points across the state. So when you have someone who did better than President Biden, who was able to flip back the state, Josh Shapiro also won in 2016 despite Donald Trump winning the state. Josh Shapiro's margin of victory is quite impressive. In fact, given the high turnout circumstances of the election, and Josh Shapiro loves to tout this because it is a fact that definitely argues to be a reason why he is electable, Josh Shapiro is the most voted for politician in Pennsylvania history when it comes down to raw vote number. That's impressive, to say the least, especially with a state that is not growing at the same rate as the rest of the nation, which is why Pennsylvania lost an electoral vote for 2024 and 2028. But looking at our 538 forecast, Josh Shapiro actually started out with about a 75% chance of victory. The Republicans had about a 1 in 4 chance. And knowing our national environment from 2010 and 2014, we likely would have seen an increase in Republican support across the state. Yet we've seen exactly the opposite. The same case has happened in the state of Michigan, though Tudor Dixon never started out with an overwhelmingly large margin at chance. She started out with about 10% in June of 2022, and then it started to dip. It started to get worse, and today it stands at about a 5% chance. In the early days of October, it was about a 3% chance, but regardless, 95 versus 97, not much really is changing. The point is, Gretchen Whitmer and Josh Shapiro are now in states that should be competitive based off their 2020 election results. These are both Trump states from 2016. And yet they are safe and solid for the Democratic Party to a point where really there is no consideration that Republicans do win it. It's not just 538 that indicates that these two states are now becoming increasingly more out of reach for the Republican Party. To remind you, they absolutely were in reach in the past, which is why it's so fascinating to see where they are right now. What was lean red and tilt red is now likely blue on both fronts. But looking at our forecast, the consensus forecast on 270 to win, you'll see here that in the consensus, from Sabatos Crystal Ball, Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, Split Ticket, and 538, Michigan and Pennsylvania are likely blue states. They're joining the ranks of states such as Connecticut. They're more partisan in favor of the Democratic Party than states of New Mexico and Maine, states that voted for Biden by 10 points and 9 points in the last election. Michigan and Pennsylvania are in the same level of partisanship, according to these forecasts, as Oklahoma, Texas, in favor of the Republican Party. That tells you everything you need to know about these races. And looking at it on a forecast by forecast level, Crystal Ball has them as likely blue. Cook Political Report, likely blue. Inside Elections has Michigan and Pennsylvania not so much in that characterization, actually quite a different direction. Michigan is tilt blue, Pennsylvania is lean blue, but arguably I just really would take this one out of the margin. 538 has them as safe. Fox News has them as lean. If Fox News is saying something as lean, that tells you, again, a lot of what you need to know. Looking at the margin of victory between the Democrats and Republicans, looking at the characterizations between the Democrats and Republicans, Fox News having it as lean blue is impressive in itself. Split Ticket has them as likely blue. Elections Daily has them as likely blue. And then looking at the U.S. News governor ratings, I don't know how much we actually look too deep into this. They have Iowa and Ohio as likely red states. I don't know if I entirely buy that. New York is likely blue. Again, arguments come up about whether or not I would actually trust that. But still, the generalization is clear. Republicans are not ahead in any of it when it comes down to the forecast. And on the average, are at likely blue. And according to 538, are safe. And 538 takes in a lot more consideration than what some of these others do when it comes down to fundamentals, when it comes down to polling data, when it comes down to fundraising data, when it comes down to election results. 538's forecast is quite frankly the most robust from what I've seen so far. But I also very much trust Cook Political Report, Sabatos Crystal Ball. I trust a lot of those pundits because many of them were correct back in 2020. Though some of them missed the mark in 2016, no one is perfectly accurate. And considering the accuracy of many things back in 2018 as well, I'd argue that I trust these numbers in addition. And new numbers out of the states of Pennsylvania and Michigan aren't exactly indicating that Democrats are losing support across the state. We have been waiting desperately for this Labor Day bump for Doug Mastriano and Tudor Dixon. We have been told that by the time we reach November, by the time we reach the final 2 months, that Dixon's going to start taking the lead, that Mastriano is going to shock the world, shock the nation, and ultimately pull ahead of Josh Shapiro. Where have I heard that before? 2018, when we talked about Bill Schuette's chances, when we talked about Scott Wagner's chances. I remember covering those races, and I remember distinctly people in my comment section saying, and no hate towards them, but their takes on these races were that the Republican Party was going to shock the world, going to shock the country, and win them. Well, quite frankly, that just did not happen, and the Democrats won the states by 17 points in Pennsylvania and 10 points in Michigan. Even though some people may think that Trump's ability to win it in 2016 supersedes anything, it doesn't. And candidate quality matters, and it matters in Michigan and Pennsylvania a lot more than it seems it matters in some other states, such as Arizona or Kansas. looking at the margin of victory for Democrats in these recent polls have actually shown me improvements over time in favor of Josh Shapiro. Looking at the earlier stages of these polling back in July, Josh Shapiro led by 4 points. In August, he led by 7, and then he dipped down briefly at the end of August, but then maintained about a 6-point lead. 6 points, then maintained about a 6-point lead through the month of September. Then it went up to 7%, went back down to 5, went to 7, and then we hit October. What happens? Jumps up to 8, jumps up to 9, jumps up to 10, jumps up to 12, and now we're standing at a 12-point margin of victory for Josh Shapiro today, with Doug Mastriano actually losing support from where he started off back in July. Mastriano losing support from where he was in mid-September. Mastriano is saying the most insane and crazy things. I've talked to Republicans from Pennsylvania. I've talked to Democrats. The Democrats, of course, are confident in both of their races, but the Republicans from Pennsylvania are much less confident about the governor's race than they are about the Senate race. And I honestly agree with that take. Pennsylvania's governor's race is no longer competitive, but the Senate race absolutely is. Dr. Oz could be the next U.S. Senator from the state of Pennsylvania, and I wouldn't be shocked. But if Doug Mastriano was to win, I'd be shocked. The same case goes in the state of Michigan. I look at some of these numbers, and I'm telling myself, we started out sure with a large victory for Gretchen Whitmer at the early stage of the campaign season at 37%. That was never winnable, and that was never going to happen. She was never going to win by 37%. That's why it never expanded beyond my likely characterization. But what I have seen so far is just a consistent lead in polls for Gretchen Whitmer. And even the partisan ones, such as Trafalgar, which partnered with Michigan News Source, showed Gretchen Whitmer ahead by 6 points across the state. These are the same people that back in 2020 said that the state of Michigan was going to go to Trump by 2 points, right? So when I see that, when I see that Trafalgar said that Trump was going to win, and they're saying Gretchen Whitmer is going to win, it sort of convinces me that it's going to be a pretty good victory for the Democratic Party. If it's able to overcome the Republican bias that we've seen across the state, I buy it. Back in 2018, too, I'm reminded of what the average polling numbers said as well. The average here for Gretchen Whitmer was a 10-point advantage. You know how much she won by? 9 points, right? And actually more than 9 points, because RCP doesn't have the actual final results, 10 points. It was off by 0.4%. When I look at the Senate race between Gabby Stabenow and John James, she ended up winning it by about 6 points, but was ahead by 8. And you know what was found? Trafalgar said that she was ahead by 9, and they were practically correct. Off by 3 points, but still correct. My point here is that the polling data in Michigan hasn't always been this egregiously inaccurate the way that Republicans would try to make it out to seem, because that's the only way they can cope with a potential loss in the state of Michigan or not come to terms with it yet, saying that these are just skewed polls. Well, even their favorite race to cite, the 2016 race, and this isn't me trying to berate against Republicans, but I do think at one point in time, when do you actually recognize that the polls haven't been as wrong as you would like them to be because you're down 10 points? That's when we draw the line. 2016, Hillary Clinton was supposed to win by 3. She lost by 0.3, right? About a 4-point shift across the state. You swing the state of Michigan right now by 4 points. Gretchen Whitmer wins by 6. She wins by 6. 6 points in a year that is significantly worse for the Democratic Party than where it was before. So no matter what, whether you take the 2016 swing in the state of Pennsylvania, which was actually not that much, only 3 points on Election Day. You take that, you apply that to Josh Shapiro, he's winning by 8, right? 9 points. You take that, you apply that to Gretchen Whitmer, she's winning by 6. No matter what way you cut Pennsylvania and Michigan, the races have become much more solid for the Democratic Party as time has gone on. Michigan started out that way because of a fiasco that went on in the Michigan Republican Party. I don't know how much you might know about the primary. I covered it personally, but the long story short, there was a frontrunner who was beating Whitmer in the polls. James Craig, the former chief of the Detroit Police Department, he ended up forging signatures to get on the ballot, so thus was disqualified by the Michigan Board of Elections. Not only him, though, the 4 other candidates running in the race, 3 of which were running ahead of Tudor Dixon in primary polling data. Tudor Dixon actually was nominated last minute as a result of a cleared field. She was polling at 2-3% prior to the rest of them being disqualified, so she was sort of a last-minute effort. Donald Trump endorsed her, and then she ended up talking on national television. It also doesn't help that Michigan has a coinciding abortion referendum that is hitting the ballot this November against the Republican Party, in which voters seem poised to pass it 60% to 40%. That can't help when Tudor Dixon is publicly saying vote against the abortion referendum, vote for a pro-life agenda, when the majority of the state clearly does not align in that favor. So Michigan was practically screwed from the beginning for the GOP, but there was still some hope in the final months getting into the campaign that it would become competitive. about 3 weeks out, I am confident that this race will not be competitive and Gretchen Whitmer will easily win re-election this November. As for Josh Shapiro, it's his first election, but he started off being someone who could have lost. I thought that was within the realm of possibility. He was only ahead by 6 points, and knowing just the state of Pennsylvania, it had historically been extremely competitive. But Shapiro made the best of the situation, campaigned extensively across the state. Doug Mastriano kept talking, and that really was his own downfall, and now he's at a 4% chance of victory. So much of these two states are targets and were targets by the mainstream Republican Party, states that were potentially going to them in the past given our national circumstance. A year later, they go from tilt and lean Republican for Michigan and Pennsylvania respectively to likely blue. And the fact is, the Democratic Party will win both of these seats. I am confident in that, and I would put money on that if I could, because I'm not 21. But right now, I will say Michigan and Pennsylvania, states that the Democratic Party, quite frankly, 3 weeks out, has nothing to worry about as we head into November. As we get closer to November, I'm going to start making a lot more of these calls, going to be a lot more confident in the things that I say, because things can no longer be uncertain as you head into November, and at some point in time, you can read into races and realize that it's no longer going to be winnable. The only thing I can imagine completely changing these races are complete change in trajectory for the Biden admin, complete change in trajectory for the public approval rating of these candidates and President Biden, and also a massive shift on the generic ballot, which quite frankly, the Democrats are pulling ahead, which means that probably just isn't going to happen. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.